Hello and welcome to yet another edition of the East-West Center Research Program Speaker Series. In this speaker series, we try to bring speakers from across the Asia-Pacific region to talk about the social, political, economic, and ecological transitions that are shaping it. Today, we're going to be talking about the upcoming elections in India. So the Indian electorate is about 980 million people strong, and very soon it's coming up for polls. And very recently, a 7-phase election schedule has been announced. Even if you assume a turnout of around turnout that is the same as the last election, which is around 67%, we are talking about nearly 650 million people who will be going to the hustings. So in order to try and understand this mammoth exercise, in order to go beyond popular media narratives, which essentially have declared the current ruling dispensation as the winner, we are fortunate to have with us Mr. Yashwant Deshmukh, one of the leading psephologists and political analysts, join us. Mr. Deshmukh is a senior journalist and psephologist with over 25 years of experience in covering the Indian elections. He consistently shares his elections in all the leading news channels of India. And he is an accomplished speaker and has conducted numerous research workshops, especially focusing on how to understand and interpret Indian election data. We will be deviating slightly from the traditional format in that this will be more of an interactive session. I am joined by Praveen Kumar, Associate Professor at the Boston College School of Social Work, who will be acting as a co-moderator. And Praveen and I will be taking turns asking a series of questions of Mr. Deshmukh. At the 30-minute mark, we will throw open the floor for audience to ask their questions. A small logistical note, please add your questions to the Q&A box on the screen below. Do not add it in the chat box, and we will funnel the questions to the speaker. So without further ado, let's start with the first question. Mr. Deshmukh, an oft-repeated comment, especially in the Western media, is that there is a democratic decline in India. A lot of commentators have expressed their worry that there is a democratic decline, so to speak. As a psephologist who's been covering elections for more than 2 decades, what is your take on this comment?
Mr. Deshmukh is on mute.
Are you getting my voice now?
Yes.
All right, perfectly. Thank you. Yeah, in the debate, in the discussion, and particularly in the Western media and the Western hemisphere, plenty of discussion has been going on about the loss of status of democracy in India, democratic decline, and that a big chunk of that discussion actually revolves around the situation of minorities, particularly after Narendra Modi government came in 10 years back, largely because of that. There is no doubt that there is a growing sense of Islamophobia in some chunks of the electorate, and there is a Hindutva-related politics that is going around. But what I find ironical or intriguing is that I find when I'm doing my surveys in US, running a trackers, I don't find anything different in any other democratic setup as on today that I would carve out India. Are we not looking at the far-right governments coming in entire Europe? Are we not looking at the issue of refugees and the migrant and growing Islamophobia in other countries? Are we not looking at the same kind of issues, same kind of polarization, if I may call so, in US? So there are public discourses, there are public discontent, and people generally forget that India has a long history, particularly post-partition, because it happens in the modern history, the only country which has been partitioned on the religious lines. So in the 1947 partition, when one big chunk of India became Pakistan, another chunk of India remained secular. But that doesn't mean that those sentiments, those emotions, that right and the left and the centrist politics of that entire thing would be done away with just because India decided to officially remain secular as far as our constitution is concerned. There is a huge, really long history, thousands-year-old history, issues which are there in the public discourse, public domain, and politics is being played on that. So I guess that when you just mentioning that almost a billion odd voters, and with in the last 10 odd years, the turnout of the voters have been only going up, and particularly the female voters, most importantly, first time voters, the democracies, the established democracies are finding it very, very challenging for people to come out and to participate in the electoral process. And here is a country where the turnouts are growing up. The first time voters are coming out with huge numbers to vote. Female voters are now surpassing the male voter turnout historically, which has been there for almost like 7 decades. Now we have a situation where the number of female voters going to the polling booth is bigger than the number of male voters who are going to the polling booth. And if you are looking at the population of 1.4 billion with almost 1 billion voters, the B, and 70% approximate turnout, majority of which is female and the first-time voters, I don't really think these are the signs of democracy going on a downward hill in any way. And also to remind everyone, in the last 10 years particularly, half of the elections in India have been won by opposition parties, not by BJP and Narendra Modi. Everybody is so over-focused on 2014 and 2019 parliamentary elections. They literally forget that we are federal structure. We have got almost 30 state and quasi-states, and 2 rounds of election in the last election, 10 years in all these. And half of those states, half of those elections, BJP has, and not just lost, they have lost by big, huge margins. So, so from when you look all those, nitty-gritties or the final details, the way the democracy works in India, it's always been an elephant in motion. It moves slow, but it goes in a direction. Many a times people are unable to understand the big picture of India. So they end up analyzing India as a blind man's elephant. Somebody holds some issue as a leg, some as a trunk, some as a tooth, some as a tail, some as a, and they try to analyze India looking at just what they are looking at that point of time. But they are unable to take a step back, see the big picture that, okay, that's a big, huge elephant. It's not just one small part of that entire thing, that idea of India, as one may call so, to say how India is behaving.
Thanks so much, Mr. Deshmukh. There are 2 key points which particularly struck with me. You did mention that the Indian election processes and arrangements are pretty much similar to like a democratic mammoth, and that's one. And second, in your response, you also kind of painted a temporal picture of the Indian election arrangements. So my question is a little related to both of these, and I'm curious to really understand, and if you could also elaborate that a little bit in terms of really discussing some of the key trends that you have been observing in the Indian elections over the past 20 to 30 years.
I will talk about the demographic trends, and that is because that will almost explain whatever the electoral trends you may like to see, you might like to analyze in that way. The biggest change in 30 years that has happened is, first of all, the economy opening up, the liberalization that happened in 1991 and onwards, the impact. That has created a huge middle class in India. Manmohan Singh opened up the economy under PV Narasimha Rao. The India when I was in college was hardly 3% middle class, hardly 3%. The India we are talking today is almost 35% middle class. And that growth is really key to understand now in India in more ways than ever, because again, a lot of stereotyping goes around the middle class, as we call it, because generally people think when we talk about middle class in India, that is urban, English speaking, high educated, high income. No, that's not the case. It's completely the other way around. In the last particular 10 odd years, the majority of the middle class is now in rural India. Majority of the middle class is not defined by high education, elitism, or any other thing, It's defined by the way they are earning. It's not no more just the service class as being the BPO capital of the world or just the IT industry, the way it is working. It's a huge economy out there, and it's an internal economy, which is the consumption of which is right now attributing to the growth story of India, which is a very organic growth, that way. So that is a huge change, because this middle class, their issues are very different from the issues which they used to be 50 years. For example, India is known to caste and religion-based votings. But the data suggests that the caste line votings, the religious line votings, they blur when the economic status changes and the issues become different. So middle class itself is becoming a group, a class, a caste group, whichever way you want to look at it. And that is very, very significant change, because we still have 65% of India joining the club. And that club will be joined over the next few decades, slow and steady. And the more that happens, a lot of traditional election equations, they will go down the drain. So that is a huge change. Second is the participation of females. As I mentioned, there are two ways of looking at the female turnout. First of all, the number of females was traditionally less than the male in the electoral roll. That has changed. Number of female, the gender gap has reduced, number one. Number two, the participation. There was 10% turnout gap. That means male turnout was 10% more than the female turnout. And that in the last 10 years not only has reduced, but it has gone the other way around. Now, female turnout in many elections in the last few years has been more than the male turnout. And that is very, very significant because of the issues that females really vote on. Our data suggests that males, particularly in the countryside, are known to think on issues which are less on the governance and more on the identity politics. But the females are pretty damn hooked on to the idea of voting on the things that they are getting, the schemes that governments are offering, and the governance, basically the governance issue. Now, I will just give you a very interesting example to elaborate this, and because when the data suggests something, you tend to look into it deeper. And for example, in last year, in 2022, there were very keenly contested assembly elections in the Uttar Pradesh. That is the largest province of India, sends maximum number of member of parliaments, 80 out of 243 to Delhi. Now, BJP swept those elections in their provincial elections, and biggest chunk of female votes actually helped them do that. When we are doing the trackers, conducting the trackers, we realized that the biggest issues for the female related to the governance, and one of the topmost priority issue was the construction of the toilets at home. Now, construction of the toilet at home is obviously very logically an issue of sanitation. Anybody would say that. But it wasn't the biggest issue for them. The biggest issue that got related with the construction of toilet at home was the issue of safety and security. Because in rural India particularly, the maximum number of sexual crimes against females happen when the females of the household have to go early morning dark hours or after the late evening hours into the field for their for sanitation purpose, and that is where they were lonely and maximum unreported sexual crimes used to happen. Now with the toilet at home, it was less of a question of sanitation and more of a question of dignity, more of a question of safety, security against the sexual crimes. And that is an issue which became a law and order issue. Now, when people started saying it's a question of law and order issue, the media picked it up with the branding of Bulldozer Baba, with the Chief Minister Yogi has it by raising, many of the times illegal structures of a minority community. But that was the buzzword for the media. But actual buzzword on law and order had everything to do with the construction of toilets and the females, the way the female voters were looking at it. So these are the things which work on the ground, and female voters, first-time voters, I talked to you about them. Every election cycle, we have almost about 10% first-time voters, every election cycle. And within 15 years, you have almost like a new generation of voters coming in, which are almost covering 25% of the new electoral vote bank. And they decide where the election is going to swing. And the impact of social media, the communication challenges, and everything that is coming in, these are huge changes, huge, significant changes, where the India from the prism of previous orthodox equations, the way we used to analyze India, that part of analysis stands no.
Thanks, Mr. Deshmukh. That was nicely put. One quick question that really kind of organically emerges is, and that's something that we have been hearing as well, that what do you expect in terms of what is the current situation in terms of whether the BJP-led current government could cross the 370 mark? And if you could elaborate that with a visual or something, that would be great.
Sure. I'm assuming majority of our audience is US centric and they understand the US congressional election. So just forget the presidential part of the US election, and it will be very easy for you to understand the Indian election. Just consider the first past the post system of 543 seats for the Indian parliament. And I have kind of clubbed them up, or segregated them in three different parts to make it easy. 100, 200, and 243. That makes the sum of total 543. So the 100 seats on the screen on your left side are the seats where BJP is zilch, zero, not present, absent at all. So you can very well see that in those 100 seats, in terms of vote share in the last two elections and in terms of seat share, BJP was lit. I mean, they polled roughly about 6-7%. And in 14, they got 3 seats, courtesy some alliance partner who offered them 3 seats to contest in their area. But that alliance partner was not there in 19, so they got a big zero out there. Now, in these 100 seats, it is either the Congress or the alliance partners of the Congress or other regional parties, where it is Congress versus the regional parties. So take them out of the equation. Second chunk is the 200 seats, largely in the north, some part in the south, like Karnataka. It's not that there is no BJP in the south, as the oversimplification of many media analysis might be telling you. 200 seats are the seats where it is BJP versus the Congress. Now, look into the margins of BJP over here and the strike rate. BJP is polling almost 20% more votes. 20% more votes than the Congress in these 200 seats, where they have a one-on-one, two-horse race kind of situation in these 200 seats. And just because they are They have a massive lead of 20% and more. Congress is just decimated. Out of 200, BJP last time won almost 171 and 185. That's almost a strike rate of 90% in those 200 seats. So that's a massacre out there. This is the base of the success of the BJP, that they have been defeating Congress in those 200 seats where it matters the most decisively. And the third chunk is 243, where it is BJP versus the regional parties. Here also, just look in the vote share graph of the BJP from 27% to almost 36%, the growth over there. And they have taken their tally from 108 to 118. So these are the states where BJP is taking on somebody like Arvind Kejriwal, somebody like Mamata Banerjee or Tejasvi Yadav, and so on and so forth, in all those states where Congress is absent, literally absent as far as the state politics is concerned. Main contest of the BJP is with that regional force, and largely speaking, the BJP's strike rate is about 50% over here. And that's a significant lot of the contest. This is where the real contest has happened in the last two elections. Now, I'll just try to do the same analysis with the fresh data of the MOTM that we did with the India Today group in January. We do run Mood of the Nation surveys twice a year for more than 20 years with India Today group now to track the sentiments on a regular basis. So if you can display the other graph, that is the graphic 02, that will show you what is the current situation. Even though we have done more trackers after that, but because this graph was readily available, I'm just trying to show that to you. So look into the first 100 seats where the BJP is absent. What is significant here is that BJP, which used to poll 5-6% in those in the states and seats where they were absent, they are polling 11. And I was looking into the tracker data yesterday, they were polling almost 15%. 5 to 15% jump, but 0 seats. Because in the first past the post system, unless you cross a threshold of 30% approximately votes, the votes don't really convert into seats properly. So significant jump in the vote share, but no impact on the seat share. BJP remains huge zero in those 100 seats. Come to the second part of it. The gap between BJP and Congress here remains 20% plus. This is the third election, and to maintain a gap of 20% votes, that's extremely significant, which tells us only one thing, that Congress has been unable to revive itself. That's the bottom line. And just because Congress is unable to revive itself, almost same number of 180 to 190 seats kind of range is likely to go back to the BJP. Because come to think of it, we are in the March, we are polling is starting in less than 4 weeks from now. 8 weeks from now, we'll be looking at the trends of the exit polls and everything. And I know everybody says that week is a long time in politics, but those understand who are doing the data crunching of politics, yes, 1%, 2%, 3% shift or change possible in 1 week, 2 weeks, but to cover a gap of 22%, 23%, long task. I guess that, unless some black swan event happens and, that kind of thing, we don't know what would be the impact, but it's unlikely to happen that Congress is not going to cover this much of gap in the next few weeks. Third part, where the BJP versus the regionals, here the BJP is almost now touching 40%. And for the first time, we are looking that BJP is likely to gain more seats when compared to regional parties. And these are the areas where BJP has dumped traditional alliance partners, gone solo. Their seats are also increasing because they are contesting bigger number of seats, which they used to leave it for their alliance partners, So their seats and the votes are increasing in these are the greenfield areas, you may call so some of them. They are trying to increase their. So I guess that the 100 seats where they are absent, they have not left it. You might have been coming, if you look into the Indian newspapers, Prime Minister Modi is probably going maximum into those 100 seats right now where the BJP is absent. That's odd. That's weird. But that's how his strategy is. He is always known to work on his weakest part of his entire domain. And then he is not leaving the 200 seats. Recently, he managed to pull the victory out of the defeat in Madhya Pradesh election, where all our trackers were clearly showing that Congress should be winning that state. But relentless campaign and organizational prowess, they ensured that they win Madhya Pradesh, from literally getting into the defeat mode. So that gap they are maintaining, and then in the regional parties game, they are taking, pumping the heat up, and they are taking the contest to the next level. So this is what is probably the second part of 200 seats is the bottom of the pyramid or base of the pyramid, where confidence comes on that my base is intact. And then on the top of the cone is the one where he is taking the fight into with the regional parties and trying to take his tally up, from what he scored in the last 2 elections. So going by these numbers, the data which is suggesting as on today, the trackers, it is going only further up. So our assessment is that BJP is roughly about, last time they were about 300, this time they might be about 325. Even the Prime Minister has given an aim of target of 370 for his party and 400 plus for his alliance. So 370 is a far task, I understand that. 400, I always assume that it could be because of mergers and acquisitions, because a lot of new alliance partners might come. And the new alliance partner, like, recently last week, only the TDP in Andhra Pradesh, where big BJP was big zero, 25 seats. TDP joined the NDA back. They were part of the NDA in 14. They left the NDA in 19. They were wiped out. And now they are on the comeback trail and they have joined the NDA, the BJP again. And with the kind of anti-incumbency sentiments, at least at the local level over there, I'm assuming that Chandrababu Naidu, the data is suggesting he is going to sweep, at least in terms of Lok Sabha with the BJP. So that kind of number might just add to that. So from 325 onwards, I always call it is merger and acquisition of the BJP, how they take it to the 400.
Thanks, Mr. Deshmukh. That's a very elaborate and nuanced response. Before we throw the floor open to the audience, I just have one question about the North-South divide in Indian politics. A lot of reports in the media have shown that there is a stark difference in how politics plays out and how the electoral trends play out in the 4 southern Indian states and the rest of the country. Could you shed some light on this? What explains these differences? What are the drivers of these differences? Could you please illuminate a little more?
Well, there are 5 southern states largely and one tiny micro state of Puducherry, which makes it 6 in that way. BJP has been largely absent. They made the first inroads in Karnataka way back in 1998-1999 elections, when they increased their vote share in the coastal Karnataka region. And then within 10 years, we have seen the BJP forming the government over there. And now BJP is right now the principal opposition. Congress is in power, but there is largely a 5-year rotational system, one election Congress and another one the BJP wins. So Karnataka is pretty much BJP in there. Telangana, they have spread like anything. And in Andhra Pradesh, I just mentioned that TDP is there. So the idea of this analysis of North-South divide is that BJP is absent in South. And what BJP is winning only in the North, it's a flawed idea. It's oversimplified narrative in a way to understand or make it appear as if South of India is under a federal system, a different country of sort. It's not. It's simply not true. Just like I mentioned, BJP is present in 2 states. Congress is also present in only 2 states in South. Come to think of it, Kerala and Telangana. Just like BJP, Congress is also absent in Andhra Pradesh. Congress is actually absent even in Tamil Nadu just because they are part of the DMK alliance and DMK is sweeping. So by courtesy, the DMK, they are winning few seats in Tamil Nadu. But Congress is a big zero in Tamil Nadu, just like the BJP. So come to think of it that out of those 5 states, 2 states BJP is present, 2 states the Congress is present, and then there are 2 states where none of them are present actually. And BJP or Congress are at loggerheads in Karnataka. They are the principal 2 warring factions in Karnataka. So if you feel like that, okay, there is a north-south divide because BJP is absent in South, I think that would be a wrong analysis because BJP and the Congress have the similar kind of strength in South. Yes, South is different from the angle of one particular line, that the regional parties have been always stronger in South, in that way. And they've had their own identity politics, particularly in Tamil Nadu, because of the Dravidian identity politics over there. And BJP and the Congress have been just going along with one way or the other with other partners. Come to think of it that the 2 parties of Tamil Nadu, they have been with the BJP in the center and they have been with the Congress in the center. So they have been alliance partner of Congress and BJP, both the parties, one way or the other. So it's not that any party over there considers Congress as untouchable or BJP as untouchable. It's not like that. TDP contested last election along with Congress, making a Mahagathbandhan or Mahakutumi as they call it, is like a grand alliance, So 14 they contested with the BJP, 19 they contested with the Congress, they lost, and then now they are back with the BJP. DMK in Tamil Nadu was part of the BJP NDA alliance in between 1999 and 2004. Then they joined the Congress and they have been with the Congress. Jayalalitha, till the point of she was alive and after her death, her party was part of Rajiv Gandhi's alliance. Then they joined the BJP, again the Congress, against the BJP. So these regional parties, same goes in JDS in Karnataka. Karnataka JDS has been with the Congress, now with the BJP. So these regional parties have been going with the Congress and the BJP as and when they feel like as per their own thing. So for them, nobody is untouchable. So if all these parties are not finding any other party as untouchable between BJP and the Congress, I don't think there is any significant trend to be read out that as if North and South is different. There is one state where BJP has been big zero so far and never won any seat. That is the state of Kerala. That is the one big state in the south. BJP's vote share in the parliamentary election particularly has touched 20% in recent elections. But as I mentioned in the first past the post system, 20% vote is not really a vote share which can win you seat. Consider it this way. If this was a proportional representation, BJP would have been allocated 20% seats from Kerala in Kerala Assembly as well, right? But just because it is first past the post system, that will not convert. BJP's vote share, unless it increases and crosses 30% in Kerala, it will not happen. So they will work on it, but BJP is absent in Kerala and Congress is absent in Andhra, and both of them are absent in Tamil Nadu, and both of them are contesting against each other in Telangana and Karnataka. That doesn't give us a ground to say that there is a north-south divide per se, and there is some significant trend which kind of indicates that BJP is untouchable in South and Congress is untouchable in North. As I mentioned, 200 seats, majority of the seats where BJP defeats the Congress is in the North. But that doesn't mean that Congress is not polling. Congress polls almost 40% votes. They did poll in the recent assembly election. That's a huge chunk of votes. Congress won 3 major states just 5 years back. Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan and Chhattisgarh, they were ruling those states for 5 years. So
Great.
there is no north-south divide. I don't see it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Deshmukh. That was again great, nicely put. I think this is the right time to move to the audience questions, and then there are a few questions that we have already been seeing pouring in. There's this one question that's quite interesting and it's quite contemporary that has been discussed as well in the election circles. It's like, will the Supreme Court's decision on election bonds have an immediate impact on the upcoming elections, and whether it is going to make a dent on the BJP's performance?
Possible, provided that the opposition makes a good campaign out of it. We ran a snap poll, and majority of them, first of all, said the Supreme Court did the right thing. Majority of them did say that, BJP benefited out of these schemes. But a big number of them also said that just dumping this entire scheme is not going to work, because then the political economy will go back to the cash economy. They wanted a much more improved and much more transparent electoral bond scheme. Funny thing is that this entire Supreme Court decision to make this data public has also made the public the fact that almost all the opposition parties also got money through electoral bonds. So the last analysis which I saw was that the split was almost 50-50. In fact, 47% of the electoral bonds going to BJP and for 53% going to the opposition parties. So in the public narrative, public is happy that transparency is coming. Public is happy with the fact that people should know which group or which pressure groups or lobbying firms are donating to which political party. But public doesn't want to go back to the old cash economy, which is completely opaque and nobody knows anything about it. So that is one thing that the public want. In the public narrative, it needs to be seen how much opposition actually plays out this issue, safeguarding their own, how they go out and say that, okay, we also took money in the electoral bonds, but our purpose of taking money of electoral bond has nothing to do with corruption, while blaming the BJP that whatever they are taking money through the electoral bond has to do with corruption. Now, it's a tall order to convince, that to anyone that I took money, but I am not corrupt, but Praveen took money and he is corrupt. In that way, Sandeep will find it difficult to adjust. Only thing Sandeep would look at, okay, Yashwant, you are sitting in, chair of power and you are likely to get more benefit out of it. Why? And I will say that, okay, I am sitting in the central chair of power, but Praveen's party is also sitting in so many states of power. So, it's a narrative which the discussion and the public discourse, it depends on how good the opposition plays on it. If they play really well, we will know in coming weeks if this is sticking through. But so far, the data that we have been doing on the snap poll for different media houses, we see that, number one, a big majority is happy that transparency is being pushed and forced on. Big majority also wants an improved version of electoral bond. They don't want the political economy to go back into the old cash-centric opaque process. And they are right now kind of in a neutral territory. It has only consolidated or polarized the electorate further in the right and the left of the camps, accusing each other. So those who are BJP sympathizers are accusing the opposition party that you also took money and there's nothing wrong in electoral bonds. And while the opposition sympathizers accusing the BJP, you took money and look at the people who have given you money and look at the decisions that you have taken, and so on and so forth. So far it looks like it has further polarized the electorate in two different camps. Much like the US, anything that happens, somehow it ends up polarizing Democrats towards being more Democrat and Republicans becoming more Republicans of sorts in their politics. So right now, the impact of electoral bond is that, a controversy is that, but let's see how the opposition plays it out if they want to really damage the BJP on this issue.
Right. Thanks, Mr. Deshmukh. The next question again from the audience is that in the response to the democracy in decline question, we had largely focused on elections and participation. But if we were to consider factors like the free and competitive media or the autonomy of election commission or the electoral bonds issue that you just discussed, what would the assessment? What would your assessment be of the Indian democracy?
Well, everybody loves free media, right? And everybody loves social media to be free. So if you are looking into the discussions that go around in the Indian social media, there are newspapers which are completely anti-government. There are newspapers and news channels which are arguably pro-government, no doubt about that. And then the same newspaper or news channel group have a different policies of their editorial coverage at the state level and the national level. So I guess the economy of media is pretty much running the same. You see, I get your question, and going by that, public understands, I understand, and I analyze, and people do state, and people, the data also confirms, raise the concerns of how the things are moving. You know, that democracy is not in good shape. When we ask this question in India Today tracker, huge number of people say, yeah, democracy is not good in good shape. Now, funny thing is, when I do the cross tabulation of that the number of people who are saying democracy is not in good shape, half of those are also BJP supporters. And they say democracy is not in good shape because of the opposition parties. So it's funny that democracy is pretty much like in US. If you ask the Republican support base, is democracy in good shape? They will end up accusing the Democrat. No, it's not in good shape because of them. It's getting in bad shape, and vice versa. And if you go to ask the Democrat supporter, they will say the same thing about, and accusing the Republicans. So going about that, ironically, why public doesn't look on certain things the way we or the intelligentsia or the thinking people, or particularly the West, wants the majority of the Indians to look it that way, is because of the history and context of it. So when you accuse the BJP, for example, that you are diluting the power of election commission, how? You are appointing your people. Your people how? Because the IAS or the other officers which are being appointed as election commissioners are known to be working with you. All right. A dig deeper, and 10 years back, we had the controversy of Naveen Chawla appointed by UPA. And prior to that, Mr. Gill, who contested on a Congress ticket. Prior to that, even Mr. T.N. Sheshan, who is called as the person who reformed the Election Commission of India, and we owe our big number of electoral reforms to him. But post-retirement, even he contested on a Congress ticket. So, thing is that in public memories, when these things play out, Mr. Gill, the ex-election commissioner, became a Congress minister. Forget about everything else. So when people put the things in that line, then the problem is that when opposition accuses the BJP, people are also get reminded of all those things that the Congress did. Undermining the institution. Same goes with the accusation on the judiciary. Same goes in everything, so on and so forth. So in the public domain, in debate, in narrative formation, one cannot just accuse and feel that people will not remember what I did. If I did the same thing wrong, it doesn't say that two wrongs don't make it right. That is what the public says is very correctly. These things should not happen. Number one, public is very clear about that we do not need to, we should not let the institutions lose their authority. The public is thoroughly supporting that. Only issue is when the BJP does something wrong in the narrative and the campaign, there are always three other things with the previous government and the opposition parties have done equally wrong. And that is where they lose the punch of it, you know. And by losing the punch of it, it doesn't really become an electoral issue because of that. I'm not justifying what BJP is doing. I'm not justifying what the problems that we are facing. I'm just trying to tell you from being an expert of reading public perception, why these things are not clicking as an electoral issue in the public perception.
Thanks, Mr. Deshmukh. So, you mentioned about your expertise of reading public perception. There is in fact a question on social media which is pretty much in conjunction with public perception. So there's this question in terms of how does access to or absence of social media inform the Indian elections?
How does, I didn't get it.
How does access to or the absence of social media inform Indian elections?
First of all, do you think that there is an absence of social media in Indian elections or access to social media in Indian elections? We ask a very classical question on our daily tracker, actually. Where do you consume your news and current affairs, you know? And on a long-term slide, let me see if I can access by the time I'm talking to you. If I would love to actually show you that data because that is the question where we ask the respondents, where do you get your news and current affairs and everything like so on and so forth? Where these days, which medium you are likely to follow in politics and current affairs? Can I put my screen somehow? I mean, is it possible that I share my screen?
Yes,
okay.
You can share the screen. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Okay, where am I? Oh, all right, here it is. This is I'm just showing you the all India numbers. I mean, all the daily tracker things that we see. Largely scraping, talking about. Is it coming on the screen properly?
Yes.
Okay, so
yes,
this is the January 1st, 19 to March 17. This is till recent data. Now, the number of this purple or magenta line, this is the number of people who are consuming news on internet and the social media. Look at the way it is growing up and up and up, right? Somewhere it is overtook during the pandemic, first wave, then again the traditional media came up. And in the second wave, it went up and it never came back. So today we are watching almost 55% Indians actually consuming their news and current affairs primarily on the social media and the internet. Primarily on that. Now, one interesting thing is that people understand that, okay, if that is the something that is coming because we are looking at the data from the southern states, north-south divide is there. But oddly speaking, it is the Bimaru states, if we call so, which their consumption of the social media data is many times more than your richer states. For example, this data of Bihar, you can see that it is almost 63%. All right. If I compare this to, say, some richer state like Karnataka or Kerala, let's take Kerala because that's the two contrasts. Like Kerala is the most literate state in India. Okay. The data is loading up. Yeah, just now look at the number in Kerala. The traditional media is still going along with the social media. So there is a huge transformation because Indians, largely speaking, first of all, we skip the landline generation. I'm sure anybody who has been born and brought up in India would know, and if you are 70s or 80s generation, I mean pre-mobile generation, you would know getting a landline was hardly 1% of Indian households. Once the mobile happened, actually we landed directly on the mobile. So that digital divide went poof. Second thing, we skipped the computer generation, we landed directly on the smartphone. So there are two huge transformations in the last 30 years that has taken place. We skipped the landline telephone, landed on mobile. We skipped the computer and landed directly on the smartphone. And this change happened maximum in the most impoverished parts of India, where these developments had not taken place when compared to the richer states of India. So automatically the consumption and everything happened happening at a scale where it is under nobody's control actually. And Indian social media, if you are following, I mean, it's as booming or as hostile as the social media in US is. The hostility is probably the same extent. I mean, you will not find, you will not miss the fun in Indian social media. Don't worry.
Thanks. So another question from the audience is about, you in one of your earlier responses, you spoke about how middle classes are becoming a powerful force in the political arena, and that caste has become a slightly less significant factor. So the member is asking if you could please elaborate on that point.
Okay, let me put it this way. Rather than going into electoral politics of it, I will just simply give you an example of the social part of it. The number of inter-caste, inter-religion marriages has gone up significantly in the last 30 years, and more so particularly in the middle classes. So, as you are aware of the Indian social system, the big number, overwhelming number of the marriages in India used to happen within own community, caste and groups and like that. That is changing. All the data points are changing, and that change is coming at a maximum pace in the middle class, because the values, as we call it, as middle class values, as we proudly call them, they happen to be the same as far as different caste or religious groups are concerned. And that is a huge change. When in the social norms, where something which was as important as marriage, having kids, and staying in a joint family, or taking care of, I mean, those kind of value-driven things which make us Indian, honestly speaking, as a value-driven society in that way, they are changing at such a spectacular rate that obviously the impact of caste as the only point of deciding my vote is going to be diluted as well. So if who my son or my daughter is marrying has diluted, and it is no more about the caste or religion, then how is my vote going to be impacted on my caste and religion? So that is a very unique thing, and it has its impact on two, I would say, the education and income thing. The more the education graphs are going up, the better income groups that they are forming. These two things are taking the equation of caste-based voting thing away from that section which is called middle class. And it is percolating down. By the way, there is no definition of middle class. Remember, anybody who is not in BPL, below the poverty line, is a middle class. So there are 50 shades of middle class, and everybody is trying to be middle class. So the way you are looking at this middle class right now at 35%, there are, as I mentioned, there are 65% people in the queue who will taking one step at a time in education, in income, and in values. So the more steps of education, income they take towards the middle class values, I believe there is a huge social transformation that is taking place, and which will be evident, pretty evident in the coming years. As I mentioned that in 15 years, you have a complete generational change of electorate. New electorate, almost 25% electorate coming in, and old electorate going out. So this pace of change is going to be way more faster now that we can realize or assume.
Thanks, Mr. Deshmukh. And in the interest of time, I will go ahead and I'll just ask one last question from the audience before we conclude. And the question is interesting. So, to what extent have the people's movements of recent times, for example, anti-farm law movement or the anti-CAA movement, influenced the outcomes of Indian politics? Why or why not?
Well, again, any issue is not a one-way traffic, you know. There is a big chunk of farmers, particularly from the western states, who are against it, and the government had to roll it back. But when we were conducting the research, there were a big chunk of farmers in the poorer state which were looking forward to it, you know. So there is an issue of distance because all the wealthier states, farming states are nearer to the Delhi region and they were much more visible on the media. But the number of people who were in favor of the farming laws, they were quite distant from Delhi, number one. So every, you know, right, left and center of it, the number of people you think are against the farm laws, you will be surprised to see the number of farmers who are in favor of the farm laws. Same goes with the CAA and NRC. And yes, CAA and NRC, they are polarizing. I would not say that they were brought with the best of the intent. You know, knowing the politics of the BJP, obviously, there was a politics of polarization at play, no doubt about that. But the way they played it out, there was very difficult to find a loophole as such that, you know, if you are talking about the religious minorities, you know, and they prosecuted religious minorities in the surrounding areas, countries, and you are giving them refuge, what could be wrong, you know? And then the question is, why are you excluding the Muslims? Simply because the states where these religious minorities are being persecuted, they are Muslim countries. So, you know, it would be very funny to say that Hindus are being persecuted in Hindu majority in India, and so Pakistan should be giving them refuge in that way. So that's the logic. If you go into my timeline, right from the start, I have taken the stand that government of India ideally, right from the starting, I have always argued they should include Ahmadiyyas and Hajaras because they are actually in Pakistan, Ahmadiyyas constitutionally are not Muslims in that way, and they are persecuted a lot. Same goes about the Hajaras in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Being Muslim, they are persecuted a lot for being from different sect or whatever, you know, the internal thing is. So I had requested and pleaded that I mean, these two minorities should also be included in that list. But just because these two are not included, rest of the Christians and the Buddhists and the Sikhs and the Hindus, they should not be included in that list. That's again a kind of injustice to those people who are waiting to get Indian citizenship because they cannot go back to those persecuting countries. So these are the narratives which are being debated a lot. So there would be always a side of it which will be going in favor of it, going against it. Only concern which I find, Praveen, is the more and more polarization, political polarization that is happening. I find because of the social media, and I think this will resonate with everybody in US, there is hardly any neutral discussion anywhere. You know, people, when they discuss on social media, they are literally pushed on North Pole and South Pole to take a side. And there is hardly any discussion. So every issue that comes in and that calls for a much more nuanced, neutral debate to see and debate the pros and the cons of that particular issue, that scope is getting limited by the day. Anything that happens and immediately people are either for this or against this based on their political alignment. And I'm almost sounding too American right now, but still, you know, you can relate to that. That's the bad side of the social media, which is happening. Otherwise, on the ground, the same people who are arguing like anything on social media, they are best of the friends. And when they sit together, they are absolutely fine. So one good thing that is happening is that tension of social media is not really percolating down in the same way in the actual man-to-man conversation, if I may say, person conversation in that way. It's not still happening that way, but I fear that if this political polarization of sort continue in every damn thing that comes in, there are a lot many things which all of us can actually agree on. There are way more things that all of us can agree on, but we are losing that side of agreeable things, only focusing on the things that all of us disagree on. So that is something which, ironically, that's something really bad side effect of social media based conversation has in society has induced it to. But I think that's a global phenomena, and India is pretty much part of the globe.
Thanks so much, Mr. Deshmukh. That was nicely put. So with this question, we have reached the end of this webinar, and both Sandeep and I would really like to thank you, Mr. Deshmukh, for your time and for enlightening us with your knowledge. We actually ended up having a whole lot of a non-partisan analysis of the Indian election arrangement, right from its historical perspective to a more contemporary time. So thank you so much, and we would also like to thank the audience for pouring in questions to such a useful webinar. We still are having more and more questions pouring in, so we would like to apologize. Sandeep and I did our best to ensure that we are as diverse in terms of picking up the questions for responding. So thanks again. Thank you so much. The recording of this webinar will be posted on the EWC's YouTube channel and on the EWC's website event page. And in this speaker series, next week, which is March 25th on Monday at 2 p.m., a 1-hour webinar discussion or speaker webinar event will be there. The title of that webinar is Central Local Relations in China's Foreign Policy Towards Southeast Asia. And the speaker is Dr. Sumi Yoshikawa, the Associate Professor of the School of Law at Senshu University. Please go ahead, register for the next week's speaker series. And with that, thank you so much. And we conclude this webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.